Hi, please pay attention. This is a very important video for every electronic technician and engineer. You're going to learn and see all electronic components, names and functions. You're going also to learn how to test using the multimeter all electronic components. We're gonna see two parts in this video. The first part is a theory part. The second part is a practical part. So let's get started with the theory part, but please don't forget to subscribe, share the video and like the video, because your likes motivate me to create more and more videos for you. So after watching the theory part, let's now begin the practical part. So the first component we have here, electrolytic capacitor. Basically the electrolytic capacitor contains two terminals, as you can see. Here we have the negative terminal, and over here we have the positive terminal. We call this capacitor polarized capacitor. So it has some characteristics including voltage and farad. Here we have its microfarad. We have 2200 microfarad and 360 volts. So the maximum voltage for this capacitor is 360 volt. There is basically many dimension and shape in this capacitor. For this, for example, we have 680 microfarad and 220 volt. It has, of course, two terminals, negative terminal and positive terminal. That's why we called it polarized capacitor. So the purpose of this kind of capacitor is to filter the current and to get a continuous current. So depending on the type and the shape and the dimension of the capacitor, the characteristics are changed. For this, for example, we have 1000 microfarad and 25 volt. The maximum voltage is 25 volt. So the second component, inductor or winding. As you can see, basically this is an inductor. It contains basically two inductors. As you can see, we have two colors over here. We have a red color and we have this orange color. Okay, so this is the first inductor. Each inductor has two terminals, and this is the second inductor. So basically the inductors has as a purpose to increase the current in the circuit. Here we have another inductor. As you can see, it contains just one winding or one inductor. Okay, there is many types of inductors. Here we have another inductor. We find basically this kind of inductor into desktop motherboard. Okay, so you can test this inductor using the multimeter and by choosing the continuity option in the multimeter. You should get a very low resistance or a buzzer in the multimeter. This inductor also we find it near to the processor in the desktop motherboard. Okay, so the inductor has as a purpose to increase the current. Now we have the relay. As you can see, this is the relay. So basically the relay contains 4 pins, 2 pins for inductor. As you can see here we have inductor, and the other 2 pins are basically for a switch. The relay has some characteristics in 10. So the voltage here we have 24 voltage and 10 amps. So this relay transform 24 volt to 240 volt. Okay, so we have another relay here, as you can see. So always you should find inductor and a switch. Here we have inductor and over here we have switch. Once the inductor receives the power, the switch will be closed. Okay, and then the power will pass from one terminal to another. So the characteristics for this relay, as you can see, is 24 volt and 125 volt. So it transforms 24 volt to 125 volt. Okay, depending on the circuit. Next we have rectifier, bridge rectifier. Okay, so these rectifiers basically are used in the switch mode power supply. Okay, in order to transform the voltage from alternating voltage to continuous voltage. As you can see here, for the bridge rectifier it has 4 pins. Okay, so I will show you in the next lectures how to test the bridge rectifier using the multimeter. Don't worry, I will teach you how to test all these components using the multimeter in the next lectures. Next we have batteries. Okay, so basically for the batteries, as you can see here, there are many types of batteries. For example, for this battery, this is a 9-volt battery. So the battery has, it's like the capacitor, it has 2 terminals, positive terminal and a negative terminal. So basically there are many types of battery. For example, here we have another battery, here we have plus and minus. Okay, this is basically this battery, we'll find it in the battery of laptop. It contains many cells like this. Here we have other batteries, as you can see. So always the batteries has plus and minus. The batteries generate the voltage and the current. So next we have MOSFETs. Basically this kind of component, it could be a MOSFET, voltage regulators, oscillators, Schottky diode, etc. So we base on the part number above it. Okay. For example, this could be a voltage regulator or oscillator, okay? But for this one, for example, over here we have two diodes. This is basically the Schottky diode or rectifier, okay? We find this kind of three-terminal component in the switch mode power supply. That's why always you should use the part number in order to identify the type of this kind of component. It could be with 3 terminals or even 4 terminals. So here we have, this is an IC basically. This is dual inline package IC. This is an IC, but specifically this IC is the BIOS, the basic input output system IC. So here we have this capacitor. This is a very known capacitor, CBB61, with 450 volts, as you can see, and 50-60 hertz. So basically this capacitor is used to remove the interference in the circuit. There is many types of capacitors, as you can see. We use this kind of capacitor basically to remove the interference frequency. But for the first capacitor, we use it especially in fans. We called it sometimes starter capacitor. And here we have transformer, as you can see. I am going to show you how to test all these components. Of course, the transformer has two parts or two stages, the primary stage and the secondary stage. This is the electromagnetic interference inductor, okay? So this is not a transformer. This basically is used to remove and to eliminate the interference in the circuit. Here we have another transformer that contains two inductors or winding, a primary winding and secondary winding. Here we have a switch, okay? This is a switch. We find this kind of switch in laptops, in computer motherboards. I'm going to show you how to test this kind of switch. It has basically 4 pins or 2 pins. So 2 pins here for ground and 2 pins for 3 volts, 3.3 volts, okay? And over here we have another switch. Basically the switch has just 2 terminals, okay? One terminal for ground, connected to ground, and the other one connected to 3.3 volt. Once you click it, you shunt between 3.3 volt and the ground, and the laptop will turn on. Here basically we have some oscillators. We find this kind of oscillators in the switch mode power supply. Okay, this is controller. They control the power. They control exactly the transformers and the power in the motherboard. We're gonna see all this in the next lectures. And here basically this is a MOSFET. Okay, this is a voltage regulator that transform from 1 volt to another volt. This is a voltage regulator, okay? And this is the heatsink. The voltage regulator in the switch mode power supply always need a heatsink in order to cool down it, okay? Here basically this is capacitors, ceramic capacitors, okay? This is ceramic capacitors. We find sometimes the ballast capacitors in this shape, but this is ceramic capacitors. So the ceramic capacitors has the purpose to remove the noise in the circuit. So we called it filtering capacitors. Then we have here transistors, okay? This is transistors, not MOSFET. So the transistor has the base, collector, and emitter. Okay, and of course, I'm going to show you in the next lecture how to test the transistor, how to identify the collector, how to identify the emitter, etc. And over here we have fuses. All these components are fuses, okay? Protection component. The fuse protect the circuit for high current. For example, this is a blown fuse. This fuse is damaged, failed. Do you see here the wire inside it? The wire is cutted, okay, is burned. So of course the fuse has 2 main characteristics, so the voltage and the amps. So let's see the characteristics for this fuse. For example, so we have 3 amps, as you can see, and 250 volts. So this fuse is failed, you should replace it with another fuse with the same characteristics, 3 amps, 250 volts. And of course there is many types of fuses. So let's see the characteristics of this fuse also. So let's zoom a little bit in order to see the characteristics. So as you can see, we have 10 amps, okay, 10 amps and 250 volts. So the wire will be in this fuse very thick. And of course there is many other types of fuses. For example, this is another fuse, okay, that is covered. So remember, the fuse has two characteristics, amps and voltage. So here we have resistors, okay, this is basically resistors. Of course, resistors, you can identify the capacity of any resistor using just colors, okay, or of course you can identify it using the multimeter. I'm going to show you all this in the next lectures. Then we have this component, we called it crystal oscillator. This is a crystal oscillator that generates the timing and the clock. Always will find this kind of crystal oscillator in the laptop motherboard and computer motherboard, near to the clock generator, near to the ICH, to the BIOS, to the super IO, etc. So if we focus here, let's see how much megahertz in this crystal oscillator we have. As you can see, about 25 megahertz. So over here we have electrolytic capacitor or chemical capacitor. This is another type of electrolytic capacitor. We can call it ACMD capacitors. We find this kind of capacitors in the computer motherboard and also in the laptop motherboard, okay? So basically it has two characteristics, the voltage and the unit in farad. For example, this one we have 390 volts microfarad and 25 volts, okay? And of course it has two terminals, negative terminal and positive terminal. Of course sometimes you can find some capacitors with a code on it, just letters. I'm going to show you in the next lectures all about this. So the capacitors, we use it to filter and to make the voltage a continuous voltage. So here we have another capacitor. This is basically a capacitor that is used in the circuit. This capacitor connects the line voltage with the neutral voltage in order to remove the interference in the circuit. So this is basically a CMOS battery, okay? We find many types of battery. For example, for this one, this is for computer. Its reference is CR2032. This is for computer and laptops, okay? This is the code, the part number for this battery. Here we have another battery, as you can see. This is also for laptop. Okay, we have another battery for laptop. And the fourth one is for calculator. So this small component basically is a ceramic capacitor or PF capacitor, picofarad capacitor. We find it everywhere in computer motherboard. This is a very important component that removes the noise in the circuit. So here we have diodes, as you can see. This is diodes, normal diodes, as you can see, with cathode and anode. Okay, as you can see, we have cathode, anode, and here we have the cathode. Okay, so this capacitor lets the current to pass just in one direction from the anode to the cathode. We use often this component to rectify the current and to protect some circuit. Here we have the Zener diode that we use to stabilize the current in the circuits. Here we have cathode, as you can see, Zener diode, stabilization of current in the circuit. So this is another capacitor. We called it tantalum capacitor. Tantalum capacitor. This is basically a polarized capacitor, as you can see, polarized capacitor. Also we use it in everywhere in any circuit in the computer. So here we have another oscillator. Basically this component include inside it two components, an oscillator IC and the MOSFET. We use this kind of IC in the switch mode power supply. This one also in the switch mode power supply. So this one is connected to its heatsink. So the heatsink is very important for this kind of component. So here, this is a very dangerous component. This is a high tension inductor, as you can see, high voltage. Never touch this component. Please pay attention. Never touch this kind of component in the circuit. Okay? Never touch it. This is a high voltage component. We'll find it in television and in some devices. So this component basically, it's not diode, it's not resistor, this is inductor. Okay, you can find this kind of inductor, for example, in computer motherboard or other devices. And here basically we have LEDs. Okay, this is LEDs, light emitting diodes. This is LEDs. I'm going to show you how to test these LEDs, okay, in the next lectures. And of course, next to the LEDs, we have some resistors. You can see ECMD resistors, as you can see. And also we have some transistors and capacitors, ceramic capacitor, etc. We're gonna study all this. And of course, here we have an IC or regulator IC. So here, this is a very important component that I'm going to teach you. All right. So this is the motor. The motor contains two parts inside it, a rotor and a stator. Okay, so this is the rotor. Okay, here I have plus and minus, two terminals in order to power it. So this is the rotor and the stator inside it. I'll show you how. So here, this is the inside of the motor. So here in this through the rotor, and this is the stator. This inductors means stator, a fixed component and a moving component. I have a video in my channel that explains the motor, how the motor works. So here we have some connectors, as you can see. Okay, the connectors, don't neglect the connectors. The connectors sometimes is the cause of the failure in the motherboard and other devices. So this is a connector with 2 pins, a connector with 3 pins, as you can see. And here we have USB connectors. It contains 4 pins. Okay, 4 pins. So this pin is for 5 volts, minus D data, plus D data, and the ground. Okay, I'm going to show you how to test it using the multimeter in the next lectures. Here we have an on-off button. This is on-off button with 2 terminals. You can find 2 terminals or even 3 terminals. So here we have a selector. This is another switch, but we call it selector between 115 volt and 230 volt. Okay, so this is selector with 2 terminals, of course. You can find others with 3 terminals or even 4 terminals. So here, this is power jack. Okay, this is a power jack. So find this power jack in motherboards. Okay, when this power jack is failed, the motherboard will be a dead motherboard. So there is power jacks with 2 terminals, with 3 terminals. Okay, and here we have the heatsink. So please, guys, don't neglect the heatsinks. The heatsinks has one of the most important role in every device. Without these heatsinks, everything will burn out in the motherboard. The CPU need heatsink, the NOT bridge need heatsink, the IC heads, the graphic card, the MOSFETs, everything needs the heatsink, especially the main components in every device need heatsink. So please don't neglect heatsink. And of course here we have the plug, the power plug that will connect to the power jack. It contains 2 terminals. I can show you also for beginners, of course, how to check and how to test using the multimeter this kind of component. Thank you very much, guys, for your interest. Please don't forget to subscribe, share the video for other people like you, and to like the video. Your likes are very important for me because you motivate me with your likes to create more and more videos for you. So don't forget to like the video. And of course, for anyone who wants more content and more advices on how to repair motherboards, don't hesitate to join me on my Patreon page where I'm sharing many other useful information, especially schematics for laptops. So thank you very much and see you in the next video.